My brother called me a lonely failure at our family dinner, and my parents laughed. They thought it was hilarious, right up until I smiled and reminded him that failures like me had been paying his rent for 3 years. And then I set a trap that dismantled his entire life. This is where the story truly begins, and you won't want to miss what happens. Make sure you're subscribed to see it through to the end. We're always curious. Where in the world are you all watching from today? Let us know in the comments. The pot roast was dry. It was the third Sunday of the month, which meant dinner at my parents' house, and the pot roast was always dry. I was 42 years old, the head pharmacist at St. Jude's Hospital, and yet every third Sunday, I reverted to being 16, bracing for impact. I'd come straight from a 12-hour shift, the bones in my feet aching and the smell of sterile solutions still clinging to my scrubs, which I'd changed out of in the hospital locker room. I was tired, I was stressed from a new formulary rollout, and I was, as my family loved to point out, perpetually single. We were clearing the main course plates when my mother, Helen, started in. We saw Diane Miller at the supermarket, Rosie. Her daughter, you remember, the one who was a year behind you. She's expecting her third. A boy this time. Isn't that wonderful? I offered a tight smile. That's great, Mom. I began stacking the plates, the scraping of porcelain setting my teeth on edge. She asked about you, of course. My father, Mark, chimed in from his armchair, where he'd already retreated with his newspaper. We told her you were busy with the hospital. I am busy, I said, my voice flatter than I intended. We're launching a new oncology protocol. It's a massive undertaking. Right, your protocols, my brother Leo said with a dismissive wave of his hand. He was lounging at the table, scrolling through his phone, not having lifted a finger to help. At 38, Leo still possessed the lazy, unearned charisma that had carried him his entire life. He was a freelance graphic designer and brand consultant, a title so vague it was meaningless. It's important work, Leo, I said, grabbing his plate, which was still half full of the dry roast he'd complained about. Sure, sis, all those little pills. Very important. He locked his phone and gave me a look I knew all too well, a mixture of pity and condescension. You know, I was just telling Mom and Dad, I'm thinking of taking a trip to Bali next month. Need to recharge the creative batteries. Met this amazing brand influencer who says the networking is insane out there. Bali, how can you possibly afford? My mother cut me off, her voice bright and defensive. Oh, it's for his work, Rosie. You know how important synergy is. Synergy, my brother's favorite word. It meant other people paying for his life. I just nodded, my jaw aching from clenching it. I turned toward the kitchen, my shoulders slumped. I just wanted to go home, put on the kettle, and sink into a bath until my skin wrinkled. I didn't want this fight. Not tonight. But Leo wasn't done. He stood up, stretched like a cat, and walked over to pat me on the shoulder. His hand felt heavy and patronizing. It's okay, Rosie, he said, his voice dripping with false sympathy. We can't all be creative successes like me. Someone has to do the boring stuff. I froze, my back to him. I could feel my parents' eyes on me. I could feel their silent, smiling agreement. I turned around slowly. I don't find my job boring, Leo. He chuckled, a soft, airy sound that grated on my last nerve. He leaned against the doorframe, folding his arms. No, but it's not exactly a life, is it? All work, no play. Still single, huh? He looked over at our parents, who were both watching us with amused smiles. Must be lonely, being a failure and all. The word echoed in the sudden silence. Failure. My father, Mark, a retired history teacher who always valued image over substance, let out a short, sharp chuckle. Now, Leo, be nice. My mother, Helen, the eternal enabler, just tittered, hiding her smile behind her hand. Oh, you too. Their laughter was the match. The years of quiet, steady resentment, of paying for my own doctorate while they subsidized Leo's artistic lifestyle, of buying my own condo while they co-signed his trendy loft, of coming to these dinners only to be chipped away at, piece by piece, it all ignited. The exhaustion from my shift vanished, replaced by a cold, crystalline clarity. I looked at my brother, at his smug, handsome face, the face my parents adored. I looked at my parents, their faces wrinkled with amusement at my expense. I smiled. It was a small, tight smile, the one I used when a doctor tried to prescribe a dangerous contraindication. A failure, I repeated, my voice quiet, cutting through the last of their chuckles. That's funny coming from a guy whose rent I've paid for the last 3 years. The room went utterly still. The color drained from Leo's face. My parents' smiles froze, their eyes widening in horror, not at him, but at me. "Rosie," my mother hissed, her voice a sharp warning. I held my brother's gaze. The panic was rising in his eyes now, the lazy charm evaporating. "What?" he stammered. "What are you?" "The loft, your creative space. $2,400 a month for 36 months. That's $86,400, Leo." I kept my voice level, precise, like I was dosing a critical medication. "I'm the failure who has been signing the checks so you can play brand consultant and plan trips to Bali." I turned, still holding the stack of dirty plates. I walked into the kitchen and set them down with a firm, definitive clack in the sink. I turned back to the 3 of them, all frozen in a perfect, horrified tableau. "And by the way," I added, grabbing my purse from the counter, "not anymore." The silence that followed was absolute. It was the sound of a dynasty, however small and pathetic, beginning to crumble. The betrayal, I realized as I walked out the front door, wasn't just his, it was theirs, and I was done paying for it. The drive home was a blur of streetlights and adrenaline. I didn't turn on the radio. The silence in my car was a relief, a balm against the ringing in my ears. By the time I walked into my own condo, clean, quiet, and paid for entirely by me, my phone was already vibrating on the kitchen counter. The caller ID flashed, "Mom." I stared at it. It buzzed once, twice, a third time. I watched it vibrate itself right off the granite and onto the floor with a muted thud. I didn't flinch. I calmly stepped over it, went to my bedroom, and changed into my favorite worn-out pajamas. Only when I was sitting on my sofa, a cup of chamomile tea warming my hands, did I retrieve the phone. 14 missed calls. 6 from Mom, 5 from Dad, and 3 from Leo. And the texts. Oh, the texts. "Mom, you need to call me right now." "Mom, Rosalie Ann, that was the cruelest thing I have ever seen you do." "Mom, you have humiliated your brother." "Dad, your mother is hysterical. You need to apologize to Leo." "Leo, you psycho, you've ruined everything." "Calling me." "Leo, I can't believe you. After everything I'm trying to build." "Mom, we are driving over." My heart hammered at that last one. I stood up and walked to my front door, sliding the deadbolt and, for good measure, the chain lock. I went to the intercom by the door. Sure enough, 10 minutes later, the buzzer rang, sharp and angry. I pressed the talk button. "Yes." Rosie, you let us in. It's freezing out here." My mother's voice was thin and reedy through the speaker. "I'm not having company tonight, Mom. I'm tired. I just got off a 12-hour shift." "Don't you be ridiculous. You can't just drop a bomb like that and then hide. Your brother is devastated." "Is he?" I asked, my voice as calm as the steel in my hand. "Or is he just devastated that his free ride is over? You should go home, all 3 of you." I heard my father's muffled voice. "She's being impossible, Helen, just impossible." The buzzer rang again and again, a frantic, desperate pecking. I let go of the talk button and walked away. I sat back on my sofa, sipped my tea, and listened to them ring for another 5 minutes before the silence of the lobby signaled their defeat. I should have felt guilty. I should have felt ashamed. For my entire 42 years, my role in the family was the stabilizer. I was the good, quiet, reliable one, Rosie the pharmacist. Dependable, predictable, the one who never made waves. The one who got her doctorate, worked 60 hours a week, and sent polite thank you notes. Leo was the dreamer. He was the one who was allowed to fail upward, to make messes that I or my parents were expected to clean up. My parents, both retired from modest careers, lived in a world where Leo's potential, was a more valuable asset than my boring reality. They saw his laziness as creative contemplation and my discipline as a lack of imagination. And I had let them. For years, I had let them. 3 years ago, Leo had been on the verge of being evicted from his trendy loft. He'd come to me, full of charm and panic. "I'm this close to landing the Nike account, Rosie. I just need a little float, just for 6 months until the contract comes through." I knew, even then, there was no Nike account, but then my parents had gotten involved. "He's your brother, Rosie," my mother had pleaded. "You have so much. He just needs a little help to get on his feet. It's the family's job to support him." So I'd agreed, not for Leo, but for the fantasy of the family I wished we were. I'd set up the automatic bank transfer, and the 6 months became a year, then 2, then 3. Every time I tried to bring it up, my parents would shut me down. "Not now, Rosie, he's under so much stress. You can afford it, dear, it's not a big deal." $86,400. It wasn't a big deal. I looked down at my phone, which had started buzzing again. A new text from Leo. "Leo, you know I'm on a lease, right? You can't just stop paying. You co-signed, you're on the hook just as much as I am." I read the text, and a slow, cold realization dawned on me. He was right. I had co-signed. In my idiotic, desperate need for family harmony, I had legally tied myself to his irresponsibility. He thought this was a threat. He thought he had me trapped. I looked at the text, and for the first time all night, I felt a genuine, grim smile spread across my face. He thought this was his leverage. He thought he was reminding me of my prison. He'd forgotten one crucial thing. He'd forgotten who I was. I wasn't a brand consultant. I was a pharmacist. My entire career was built on precision, documentation, and managing catastrophic risks. He thought he was playing checkers. I was about to set up the chessboard. The morning after the dinner, the silence from my family was deafening. After the 2 a.m. flurry of rage-filled texts and the failed assault on my intercom, my phone had gone blessedly quiet. It was a cold, gray Monday, and as I stood in my kitchen, the pre-dawn light filtering in, I felt a strange sense of calm. The adrenaline had faded, leaving behind a hard, clear resolve. They were waiting for me to break. They were waiting for the good daughter to be consumed by guilt and come crawling back with an apology and a check. I sipped my black coffee, my mind already working, compartmentalizing. At the hospital, I was responsible for the medication protocols for hundreds of patients. I cross-referenced dosages, checked for adverse interactions, and followed every single regulation to the letter. My job was to find the errors. My job was to see the patterns others missed. For the past 3 years, I had intentionally not applied that logic to my brother. I had forced myself into willful ignorance because looking too closely was too painful. The arrangement was a black box. I put $2,400 in, and in return, I got to pretend I had a family that didn't resent me for my success. But Leo, in his arrogance, had just handed me the key. "You co-signed." He was right, I had, and I had a copy of that lease agreement filed away in my desk. I spent the day at the hospital in a state of hyperfocus. While my hands dispensed medications and my voice calmly consulted with doctors, the back of my mind was building a case. I saw the parallels everywhere. A doctor prescribing a medication based on a patient's self-diagnosis, not the lab results. That was my parents buying into Leo's creative genius, label without ever asking for revenue. A patient demanding a higher dose, claiming their pain was unmanageable, while clearly exhibiting signs of misuse. That was Leo, with his Bali trips and his synergy. I was the pharmacist, and I was finally going to review the prescription. That evening, I didn't turn on the TV. I didn't draw a bath. I opened my laptop, pulled the manila folder containing the lease from my file cabinet, and got to work. The first thread I pulled was the lease itself. I had co-signed, yes. I was legally on the hook for the rent to the landlord, but what about my arrangement with Leo? There was no contract. There was only a 3-year-long string of text messages and bank transfers. The texts from my parents, however, those were interesting. Just help him out, Rosie. Be a good sister. He'll pay you back when his business takes off. It was a family matter. And Leo's text from last night, "You can't just stop paying," was an admission that I had been paying. Leo, I realized, was the perfect startup founder. He had the charisma, the buzzwords, and the unshakable belief in his own brilliance. My parents, Mark and Helen, were his perfect first-round investors. They weren't investing money, they didn't have any. They were investing my money. They were the enablers, the ones who saw his failures as pivots and his laziness as ideation. I remembered a Christmas 4 years ago, before the rent arrangement started. I had just put a 20% down payment on my condo. I was proud. I'd saved for years. At dinner, I'd mentioned it. My father had nodded, distracted. "That's smart, Rosie, very practical." Later, Leo had arrived, 2 hours late, with a flimsy excuse about a client emergency. He then held court for an hour about his new business idea, a curated subscription box for artisanal dog toys. My parents were enraptured. "See, that's vision," my father had said, beaming at Leo. "Taking a risk, building something from nothing. It's the American dream, son." "Oh, it sounds wonderful, Leo," my mother gushed. "So creative. Rosie, doesn't that sound creative?" I'd looked at my brother, who hadn't worked a real job since he'd been fired from a marketing agency 6 years prior. Or for creative differences, which I later found out meant not showing up. I'd looked at my own hands, calloused from years of work, my mind weary from the sheer volume of knowledge I had to maintain to keep people alive. "It sounds expensive," I'd said. The mood had soured immediately. My mother's face tightened. "Rosie, don't be a pessimist. You have to spend money to make money." "Right," Leo had scoffed. "But what would you know about risk? You've had a safe, stable job your whole life." Safe, stable. As if my job didn't involve daily life and death calculations. As if the safety I'd built wasn't the product of relentless, grueling work. But in my family's narrative, I was the boring, risk-averse spinster. Leo was the bold, creative visionary. And that was the dynamic they needed to maintain. My success wasn't my success. It was the family's safety net. It was the resource pool that allowed Leo to be the visionary. My role was to be the bank, and my payment was the occasional, patronizing pat on the head. Until last night the bank had spoken, and the bank had said no. Now, sitting at my desk, I opened my online banking portal. I set the transaction history for the last 36 months. Line by line, the transfers populated the screen. $2,400, $2,400, $2,400. A steady, relentless bleed. $86,400. My phone, silent all day, suddenly lit up. A new text. It wasn't from my family. It was from an unknown number. "Is this Rosalie? This is Amber. I'm Leo's girlfriend. He told me what you did. You need to fix this. You can't just destroy his life because you're jealous." A girlfriend? Leo had never mentioned a girlfriend. I looked at the name. Amber. A quick search on social media, and there he was. Leo, not on his own sparse, professional page, but on the glittering, curated page of one Amber Lux Travels. And the pictures, oh, the pictures. There was Leo in Santorini, raising a cocktail glass. Leo on a ski lift in Aspen. Leo and Amber kissing in front of an expensive restaurant in New York, dated just 3 weeks ago. My blood didn't just run cold, it froze. Bali wasn't a networking trip. It was a vacation. His creative batteries were being charged by my 12-hour hospital shifts. The synergy he was so fond of was me, working overtime, while he and Amber lived a life I couldn't even dream of affording. And she had the audacity to call me jealous. I took a slow, deep breath. The investigation had just begun. He'd forgotten the most crucial thing of all about me. I'm a pharmacist. I check the receipts, all of them. My shift from passive victim to active strategist wasn't a sudden explosion. It was a slow, cold titration. It was the precise, methodical process of adding one drop of evidence at a time until the entire solution changed color. The text from Amber was the final drop. The jealousy I felt wasn't for her or for Leo's manufactured life. It was a cold, hard rage at the sheer audacity of the con. My meticulous nature, the very trait my family mocked as boring and rigid, was now my greatest weapon. For the next 3 days, I lived a double life. By day, I was Rosie the head pharmacist, managing inventory, consulting on complex cases, and training new residents. My colleagues noticed nothing, other than perhaps that I was even more focused than usual. By night, I was Rosie the forensic accountant. My leverage, I realized, wasn't just the bank statements. It was the lease. Leo's text had been a threat, but he'd misunderstood the battlefield. As a co-signer, I wasn't just a guarantor. I was a legal tenant. I had rights. On Tuesday evening, I called the property management company for his building. "Hello," I said, my voice bright and professional. "My name is Rosalie, and I'm one of the leaseholders for Unit 12. I'm updating my financial records for my accountant, and I seem to have misplaced the last few utility statements. Could you possibly send me a copy of the payment ledger for the last 12 months? The woman on the other end was happy to oblige. "Of course, Ms. I see you here. Yes, Rosalie, I can email that to you right now. Just to confirm, is the email r@hospital.org still correct?" "That's the one, thank you so much." The email arrived 5 minutes later. I opened the PDF and my breath caught. The rent, my $2,400, was paid on time every month. No surprise there, it was my automatic transfer. But the other charges, the utilities, the parking garage fee, the amenities fee, were a different story. March, late fee applied $75. April, late fee applied $75. May, final notice, $150. He was delinquent. Even with me paying his single largest expense, he still couldn't manage his money. My $2,400 wasn't helping him get on his feet. It was the massive, stable foundation that allowed him to be reckless with everything else. The trap wasn't just cutting him off. The trap was understanding the full scope of his dependency. Next, I turned my attention to his business. Leo Creative, his website called it. It was sleek, minimalist, and full of impressive-looking graphics and logos for brands I'd never heard of. A full-service branding and synergy consultancy, the bio read. I right-clicked on one of the client logos. Search image with Google. My stomach tightened. The logo wasn't his. It was a stock image from a design template. I checked another. And another. They were all from the same $50 website template. His entire portfolio was a fake. He wasn't a freelance graphic designer. He was a man with a website. My investigation was no longer about the money I'd lost. That was gone. This was about the truth. My family had built a narrative around a lie, and I was the villain for puncturing it. Now I would dismantle it, piece by piece, with documented evidence. The Amber Luxtravel's social media account was a goldmine. It was public. She was an influencer, which seemed to mean she took pictures of expensive things, and there, in dozens of photos, was Leo. Amber Luxtravels, Feb 14. He surprised me with a weekend in NYC. Red Apple so blessed to have a man who works so hard and spoils me. Boss babe hustle life. The photo was of them at a rooftop bar, snow dusting the skyline. I cross-referenced the date with my bank statement. February 12th. I'd worked a double shift that weekend to cover for a colleague who had the flu. Amber Luxtravels, March 20. Aspen was a DREAM. Skier Leo is a natural on the slopes, of course. Winking face, ski trip living our best life. March, the same month he'd been hit with a late fee for his utilities. I saved every photo. I screenshotted every post. I created a new folder on my laptop and labeled it simply Receipts. The final piece of the puzzle came on Thursday. My mother, having received no response from me for 4 days, changed tactics. She sent a text that was, for her, the pinnacle of diplomacy. "Mom, Rosie, dear, we are all very upset. This has gone on long enough. "Your father and I want to have a proper family meeting on Sunday, just to talk. Please come, we miss you." A family meeting. I knew exactly what that was. It wasn't a talk. It was an ambush. It was the part of the ritual where the errant member, me, was brought back into the fold, gently scolded and reminded of their responsibilities. It was the meeting where I would be emotionally manipulated, guilt-tripped, and pressured until I agreed to turn the financial tap back on, for the good of the family. Last time, I would have dreaded it. I would have felt sick with anxiety. This time I felt prepared. I replied with a single word, "Okay." I spent the next 2 days preparing for that meeting with the same intensity I used to prepare for a hospital accreditation review. I didn't just have data, I had a presentation. I printed the late notice-riddled utility ledger. I printed the side-by-side comparison of Leo's portfolio and the website template it came from. I printed, in high-resolution color, the social media posts from Amber, complete with dates. I placed them all in a sleek, black binder. I created a summary page, a spreadsheet that detailed the $86,400 I had paid, and next to it, a column that estimated the cost of his lifestyle trips. My father was a history teacher. He respected primary sources. My mother was an administrator. She respected organization. I was a pharmacist. I respected evidence. I was no longer the passive, lonely failure. I was the one who had read the fine print, and I was about to walk into that family meeting and deliver a clinical, devastating, and irrefutable diagnosis. I walked into my parents' house that Sunday feeling like a different person. The familiar anxiety that usually settled in my stomach was gone, replaced by a cold, steady pulse. I wasn't here as a daughter. I was here as an auditor. I was carrying my large work tote, the black binder tucked safely inside. They were all waiting for me in the living room, a perfect tableau of a family intervention. My mother, Helen, sat on the sofa, dabbing at her dry eyes with a tissue. My father, Mark, stood by the fireplace, arms crossed, trying to look stern and patriarchal. And Leo. He was perched on the edge of the armchair, affecting a look of wounded but brave misunderstanding. He looked like a man about to accept an award, not a man who'd been exposed as a leech. "Rosie, you're late," my father said, his voice clipped. "My shift ran over," I said, which was true. I placed my tote bag on the floor by my feet as I sat in the single chair opposite them, the executioner's chair. "You wanted to talk." My mother burst into motion, the tissue flying to her face. "Oh, Rosie, how could you? In front of everyone, to say such a private thing, your brother. My goodness, we've barely gotten him to eat all week. He's been so distressed." I looked at Leo. He looked perfectly healthy to me, if a little pale. He was wearing a new-looking cashmere sweater. "I'm devastated, Rosie," Leo said, his voice quiet and hoarse. He was good, I had to give him that. "Just, blindsided, I thought you supported me. I thought you believed in my vision." "I supported your rent, Leo," I said, my voice even. "Belief is a different category." "This isn't about the money, Rosalie," my father boomed, stepping forward. "This is about family. This is about loyalty. You humiliated him. You humiliated us. We are your parents. We asked you to help your brother who was struggling." "Was he struggling, Dad?" I interrupted. My father stopped, thrown by the question. Of course he was struggling. Trying to get a business off the ground is the hardest thing a person can do. It takes grit. It takes sacrifice. "Does it?" I asked. I leaned forward, my hands clasping my knees. "It's funny, my version of sacrifice has been working 60-hour weeks, including holidays, to manage the medication for an entire oncology wing." Leo's version of struggling seems to involve a ski trip to Aspen. The room went silent. Leo's eyes widened, the first flicker of genuine panic. What are you talking about?" "Aspen," I repeated. "In March, it looked lovely, and New York in February, for Valentine's Day. That rooftop bar looked very expensive. Did you synergize a lot on those trips, Leo?" My mother looked confused, turning to Leo. "New York, Leo, you told us you were at a design conference in Poughkeepsie." She's crazy, Leo stammered, his mask of wounded artistry slipping. He shot me a look of pure venom. She's stalking me. You're stalking me, Rosie. That's what you're doing. Going through my private life because you're so bitter and jealous that I'm in a happy relationship and you're not. Ah, yes, Amber, I said, nodding. The Lux travel blogger, the one who called me jealous. No, Leo, I'm not stalking you. Your girlfriend's social media is public. You, on the other hand, are a fraud. That's enough, my father shouted, his face turning a deep, angry red. You will not come into this house and call your brother a fraud. He is a talented designer. He has a portfolio of clients. Does he? I asked, my voice still quiet. I reached down into my tote bag. Because this is where it gets interesting. I pulled out the black binder. The thud it made when I placed it on the coffee table was the loudest sound in the room. My mother stared at it like it was a snake. What is that? She whispered. This, I said, flipping open the cover, is my due diligence. The audit I should have done 3 years ago. I turned the binder to face them. The first page was the spreadsheet. My $86,400 in payments on one side. On the other, a list of dates and locations. Aspen, New York, Santorini, 3-star Michelin restaurants. Rosie, this is insane, Leo said, trying to laugh it off, but his voice was an octave too high. I have clients. I do client dinners. You do, I agreed, but you don't have a portfolio. I flipped the page. This is your website, and this, I tapped the adjacent page, is the $50 template you bought it from. See? The logo is the same. Aperture Designs, Zenith Solutions. You just copied and pasted them, Leo. You didn't even bother to change the filler text on 2 of the pages. My father, the historian, leaned in, his eyes scanning the pages. He knew primary sources when he saw them. He looked up at Leo, his expression no longer angry, just blank. Leo, my father asked, what is this? It's just a placeholder. All designers do it, Leo insisted, but the sweat was beading on his forehead. You don't understand the industry. I understand the leasing industry, though, I continued, relentless. I flipped to the next section. This is the payment ledger from your building, the one I co-signed for. Funny thing, even with me paying your $2,400 rent every month, you've been late on your utilities and parking fees 6 times in the last year. You're racking up late fees, Leo. You're not struggling to build a business. You're just irresponsible. My mother made a small, wounded sound. She was looking at Leo, her eyes pleading with him to deny it. But Leo just stared at the papers, his face pale and clammy. And finally, I said, turning to the last, most colorful section, the Amber Lux Travels file. I laid out the printouts one by one on the coffee table. Leo in Aspen, Leo in New York, Leo in Santorini, grinning, holding a glass of wine, the sun setting behind him. You've been traveling, my mother whispered, her voice cracking. You told us you were selling your old car to pay for that server upgrade. The lies were all unraveling, tangling together in a heap on the table. The family meeting was not going at all as they had planned. The intervention had been turned on its head. Leo finally snapped, but it wasn't a breakdown of guilt. It was an explosion of rage. You, he suddenly screamed, standing up and pointing a shaking finger at me. You did this, you joyless bitter. You couldn't stand to see me happy. You've always been jealous of me. Always. Because I'm the one Mom and Dad are proud of. I'm the one with talent. You're just a pill pusher, a glorified clerk. He was breathing hard, his face mottled. I didn't flinch. I just looked at him, my expression calm. You're right, Leo, I said. I am a pill pusher. And this clerk is the only person who has been keeping your entire fake life from collapsing. You think I'm the failure. I stood up, closing the binder. You have 30 days, I said, my voice as sterile as an operating room. The lease is up at the end of next month. I will not be renewing the co-signature. And I will not be paying another cent. You call me jealous? You call me a failure? You are a 38-year-old man who has been living a lie funded by his sister. You're not a brand consultant. You're a con artist. And the co. N is over. I left the binder on the table, a final, primary source for my father to review. I picked up my tote and walked to the door, the sound of my mother's first real sob following me out into the hall. The binder was a bomb, I knew it, but I had underestimated the blast radius or perhaps the sheer, stubborn density of my family's denial. The silence lasted 2 days. Then the desperation began. It wasn't Leo who called, it was my father. His voice on the phone was not the voice of the booming patriarch from the intervention. It was the reedy, hesitant voice of a man who had seen the evidence but couldn't accept the verdict. "Rosie," he started, his voice rough. "Your mother is a wreck. She hasn't stopped crying." "Crying about what, Dad? The lies, or the fact that the money is gone?" "That's not fair," he said, but there was no conviction in it. "He's your brother. He made mistakes. He got in over his head. This Amber girl, she's a bad influence. She's been taking advantage of his good nature." I almost laughed. "His good nature? Dad, he is the one taking advantage. He lied to all of us. He lied to you. Don't you care about that?" "What we care about," he said, his voice hardening slightly, "is that his life is about to be ruined. He's going to be evicted. It's going to destroy his reputation. His brand." "His brand is a $50 website template," I shot back. "And he's not just going to be evicted. I spoke to the landlord this morning." This I had been saving. This was the masterstroke my pharmaceutical mind had been working on. "What do you mean?" my father asked, a new note of alarm in his voice. "As co-signer, I'm a legal tenant. I requested a unit inspection. I cited concern over potential lease violations. The building manager did a walkthrough yesterday." You what?" "They found several violations. The amenities he was racking up late fees on, it was for an unauthorized storage unit in the basement and an extra parking space he was subletting to someone else for cash. Both are breaches of the lease. They also found evidence of his girlfriend having residency, which is another violation." My father was speechless. "The property management is terminating the lease," I said, my voice devoid of emotion. "They're serving him an eviction notice tomorrow. He has 10 days to vacate." 10 days, my father practically shrieked. "Rosie, you can't. Where will he go? He'll be on the street." "He can go to Bali," I said. "Or he can go to Aspen. Or he can come and live here in your guest room. But he is not staying in that apartment on my dime or on my credit for 1 more day. I've already paid the final termination fees just to have my name removed and to avoid an eviction judgment on my record." You set him up," my father whispered, horrified. "No, Dad, he set himself up. I just read the contract. Something none of you ever bothered to do." I hung up the phone. The desperation, I knew, would now escalate to panic. Leo was no longer just losing his allowance. He was losing his home. The phone rang again almost instantly. This time it was Leo. I let it go to voicemail. His message was a masterpiece of narcissistic rage. I am going to sue you," he screamed into the phone, his voice cracking. "You sabotaged me. You're trying to ruin me. I have clients. I have projects. You just destroyed my business. You are a sick jealous. You'll be hearing from my lawyer." A lawyer, good. I hoped he had one. The final confrontation came 2 days later. He didn't come alone. He brought my mother like a human shield. They showed up at my condo, unannounced, just as I was getting home from my shift. They must have waited in the lobby, because the moment I badged in, they were there, pushing into the elevator with me. "You have to stop this, Rosie," my mother said, her eyes red and puffy. She looked exhausted. "There's nothing to stop, Mom. It's done. The lease is terminated." "He'll be homeless." "He's 38 years old, Mom. He can get a job. He can get a roommate. He can stay on your sofa. These are things normal adults do." We rode the elevator in suffocating silence. When we got to my floor, Leo, who had been vibrating with silent rage, finally spoke. "You think you're so smart," he hissed as I unlocked my door. "You think you've won. You've always been like this. Just because you're good at memorizing things, you think you're better than me. I turned to face him in my doorway. I don't think I'm better than you, Leo. I know I'm more responsible than you. I know I work harder than you. And I know I'm not a liar. He'll pay you back, my mother cried, grabbing my arm. Right, Leo, you'll pay her back every penny. Just call the landlord. Tell them it was a mistake. Give him another chance. She was looking at him desperately, begging him to play along, to say the magic words that would fix everything. Leo just sneered. Pay her back? With what? She just destroyed my entire business. She's the one who should be paying me for damages. My mother's face crumpled. It was the first time, I think, that she true. Lai saw him, not the creative boy, not the visionary, but the empty, entitled man he had become. She had offered him the perfect lifeline, the one that would have appealed to my sense of fairness, and he had spat on it. He's right, Mom, I said, my voice softening as I looked at her. He has no intention of paying me back. He never did. I looked past her at my brother. You're not suing anyone, Leo. You don't have a lawyer and you don't have a case. You have 10 days. I'd suggest you spend less time threatening me and more time packing. And Amber, I added, unable to resist. I sent her an email from my hospital account. I attached the lease agreement and the notice of termination. I just wanted to make sure she, as a cohabitant, was fully aware of the situation. Funny, she hasn't posted any Lux Travel updates in 48 hours. Leo's face went from red to a ghostly white. That, finally, was the blow that landed. The public humiliation, the loss of his audience. You didn't, he whispered. I did. Now, please get out of my hallway. My mother, for the first time in my life, didn't defend him. She just looked at him, her face a mask of profound disappointment, and then turned and walked back to the elevator without a word. Leo, defeated and deflated, had no choice but to follow. The 10 days passed in a blur of silence. My family, for the first time, seemed to be holding its breath. I half expected another ambush, another round of desperate calls, but there was nothing. It was as if a storm had passed, and I was in the eerie, quiet eye. I used the time to finalize the termination. I signed the last of the paperwork, paid the penalties, and received a legal confirmation from the property group that Rosalie was no longer associated with Unit 12. The weight that lifted off my shoulders was so profound. I nearly cried with relief in the car. Then, 2 weeks after the eviction, my father called. His voice was different. It was flat, heavy. Rosie, he said, your mother and I were having a small dinner on Sunday. Not like before, just dinner, and Leo will be here. We need to talk as a family, properly this time. I hesitated. Dad, I've said everything I need to say. Please, he said. It was the first time I had ever heard my father beg. There are things that have been decided. We just want you to be here. A part of me screamed not to go, but another, more curious part, the part that had compiled the binder, needed to see the resolution. I needed to see the final data. Okay, Dad, I'll be there. I arrived on Sunday. The house was quiet. My mother was in the kitchen, but she wasn't bustling. She was just stirring a pot, her shoulders slumped. When she saw me, she gave me a weak, watery smile and nodded toward the living room. My father was on the sofa, and Leo was sitting in the armchair, the one he always lounged in, but he wasn't lounging. He was sitting ramrod straight, staring at his hands. He was wearing an ill-fitting button-down shirt and looked like he hadn't slept. I sat in the same chair as before. This time, I brought no binder. I had no more evidence to present. My father cleared his throat. Well, he's here. I looked at Leo. His creative spark was gone. His charm was gone. He looked small. Leo has been staying with us for the last 2 weeks, my father began, his voice a dull monotone, as if he were reading a history report. In the guest room. My mother came and stood in the doorway, wringing a dish towel. His girlfriend Amber is no longer in the picture, my father continued. And his business. It's gone, Leo said, his voice flat. The website is down, everything. Are you happy, Rosie? You won, you blew it all up. I just looked at him. There was nothing to blow up, Leo. It was a house of cards. A light breeze would have done the same thing. You call this a light breeze? He shot back, a flash of the old anger. I'm ruined. No, my mother said, her voice surprisingly firm. She stepped into the room. You're not ruined, Leo, you're just at the beginning. I looked at her, surprised. She turned to me. Rosie, what you did was hard. It was hard for us to see, but that binder you left, your father and I, we read it all. The pictures, the website, the late fees. My father nodded, his face grim. We were fools, Rosie. We were so proud of his vision. We never looked at the facts. We wanted to believe it so badly. We enabled him, my mother said, tears welling in her eyes. We pushed you to enable him, and that was wrong. We are so sorry, Rosie. I was so stunned, I couldn't speak. This was the one outcome I had never, in all my meticulous planning, accounted for, an apology. So, my father said, taking a deep breath and standing up, we have a plan. Your mother and I, we've told Leo. Things are going T. Oh, chain. Leo visibly tensed. First, my father said, Leo, you will get a job, a real one, with a paycheck. I've already called my old colleague at the school district. They need an administrative assistant in the main office. You start tomorrow. Leo's head snapped up. A secretary, at a high school, Dad, no, that's beneath me. Nothing is beneath you right now, son, my father said, his voice hard as iron. You will go, you will be on time, and you will work. Second, you will be paying your mother and me rent for the guest room, a modest amount, but it will be paid. And third, my mother chimed in, you will be paying Rosie back. Leo stood up. This is ridiculous, I'm not. You will, my father commanded, and for the first time I heard real authority in his voice. We have calculated what you owe, not the full $86,000. We know that's too much, but you will pay her back for the last year, and for the penalties she paid to get her name off that lease. The total is $30,800. 30, Leo looked like he was going to be sick. We are drawing up a formal legal repayment plan, my father said. $100 a month from your new paycheck. It will take you a long time, but you will do it. You will do it to show your sister respect. And you will do it to show us that you are, in fact, a man and not the child we have treated you as. The showdown was not the one I expected. It wasn't me against them. It was my parents, finally, stepping up. Leo looked at me, his eyes full of hatred. He was looking for an escape, a way to charm his way out. He looked at my mother, who just shook her head, tears rolling down her cheeks. He looked at my father, who stood like a statue. The room was silent. The pot roast, which I could smell from the kitchen, was probably dry. Finally, Leo's shoulders slumped. The last of the air went out of him. He sank back into the chair, the fight gone. Fine, he whispered. Whatever, fine. My father nodded once sharply. Good, Rosie, will this be acceptable to you? I looked at my brother, this deflated, 38-year-old man. I looked at my parents, who looked older than I had ever seen them. I wasn't getting my $86,000 back, but I was getting something I thought was lost forever. Yes, Dad, I said, that's acceptable. I realized in that moment that my failure of a life, my quiet condo, my demanding job, my single status was my fortress. It was my success. It was my peace. And I had just defended its borders. The weeks that followed were strange. The $100 payment arrived in my bank account on the first of the month, exactly as promised. It was a comically small drop in the ocean of what I was owed, but it wasn't about the money. It was the data point. It was the proof of a new protocol. Leo, from what I heard, was miserable. My mother, in a cautious phone call, told me he was adjusting. He hated the 8 a.m. start time. He hated the fluorescent lights. He hated taking orders from the school principal. He was, for the first time in his adult life, accountable to someone other than himself. His brand was now a name badge that read, Leo Administration. My parents and I began a new, tentative relationship. We met for coffee, not for dinner. We met on neutral ground. We talked about my work, really talked about it. I explained the oncology protocols, the new trial medications. They listened, their faces a mixture of awe and, I think, for the first time, genuine respect. They told me about their retirement plans. They didn't mention Leo unless I asked, and when I did, the reports were brief. He filed his paperwork on time. He balanced the copy-paper budget. The family narrative, so entrenched for decades, had finally been rewritten. I was no longer the boring utility. I was the one who had seen the truth, and they, in their own way, were grateful for it. 6 months after the binder, I was at my desk at the hospital, finalizing the end-of-quarter reports when I received an alert. It was a bank transfer. Not the expected $100 from Leo, but a new one for $5,000. The memo read, "A down payment. Dad." I called him confused. "Dad, what is this?" It's from your mother and me," he said, his voice quiet. "We've been reevaluating our finances. We sold your grandmother's old silver, the set we were saving for Leo. It's not much, not compared to, but we wanted to, it's a start." I held the phone, tears welling in my eyes. "Dad, you don't have to do that." "Yes, we do, Rosie," he said firmly. "We were investors in his fantasy. We have a debt to you, too. We're a family. We're supposed to be a real one." I finally used the money I had been saving, the money that had once been earmarked for my brother's rent, and now the money my father had sent. I booked a trip. It wasn't to Bali, and it wasn't to Aspen. It was a 2-week solo trip to Japan, a place I had always dreamed of seeing. I went to quiet temples. I ate incredible food. I walked through bamboo forests, my mind blessedly, wonderfully empty of protocols and family drama. I was alone, and it was not lonely. It was peaceful. I sent my parents a postcard from Kyoto. My mother texted me a photo in response. It was of Leo, standing by my father, both of them holding rakes. They were raking the leaves in my parents' backyard. It was a simple, domestic scene, but to me, it was revolutionary.